Looks like I already have your attention. So I'll begin. If you're like me and you go on LinkedIn for any length of time, you're on an internal or external Slack channel, or you're out having networking conversations or conversations like this, one topic always seems to slip in, and that is AI. So I think this is all from one day, one scroll through my LinkedIn feed. I just started taking screenshots of posts on AI that I saw. And it's not really important that you know the content of them. The point is that they were all there in one scroll. And even the fact that you can't quite read all of them is part of the point. It's that there's just so much there, right? There's too much there to read. And nobody wants to scroll through all those posts and understand them. And if you try, they all end up contradicting each other anyway. Every post that says something exciting about AI has got 5 comments underneath saying why that isn't true. So for me, all that chaos led to a sense of being overwhelmed. And the message came across mainly as your business is going to keel over and die by the end of the year if you don't start making huge investments in AI right now. So the questions I was asking was, am I behind? And how do I catch up? I was on the fence. This is an analogy that I got from my friend Jay Smith. So many of us at some point in our journey with AI end up on the fence. On one side is a fear of falling behind people who are already using AI, perhaps competitors. And then on the other side is uncertainty of how to begin adopting AI, how to start, what are the risks, what tools should I start with, and even a question of whether or not it's possible to catch up. Am I too far behind? So my goal in this presentation will be helping us to jump off of the fence and start running with AI. The innovation that we've seen in the past few years with AI is super exciting. Uncertainty when things are developing at such a breakneck pace is absolutely normal. So if you're feeling some amount of uncertainty or confusion over AI, you're certainly not alone. And my aim will be to convince you that there's still so much to be gained from adopting AI, and that we should just begin now. So now that I've told you some of my experience and impetus for this presentation, I'd like to ask you about yours and discuss it a little bit. So if we could go around the room, Vince, if you want to start, just introduce yourself really briefly, and then answer these questions. So first, how is AI affecting your industry and business uniquely, if at all? Have you had a fence moment? Did that illustration resonate with you? And then do you see AI as a strength, weakness, opportunity, and or threat to you in your current position or your business? So we'll start with Vince and then just kind of go around the room.
I'm Vince Kendon. I'm with Southern Indiana Works. We work with businesses and also help job seekers, not a placement people. But what really got me on this was at our Workforce Summit. That was our main topic.
Mm-hmm.
How can AI help, or where are we at in workforce, helping job seekers and helping businesses in that regard? Was on the fence. I don't know if I was on the fence. It was like I had no clue. I just keep hearing it. And then of course with Microsoft or Google, when you search something, it'll pop up.
Mm-hmm.
Never used it. So as I talked to you earlier, I see it as could be a strength in our coaches side, helping, because we all know that we're probably not looking for jobs, but if you write a resume, there's certain ways to write the resume.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't write the resume correctly, you're going to be kicked out.
Yep.
So the reason I was talking to Caleb is maybe we can help teach our coaches how to, and they teach job seekers, this is where you don't want a 6-page resume, you need this, and here's how you do it, because you're trying to get through the gateway. So I think this can be a complete strength. You're going to have to jump in. It's kind of like, when Excel, all that. I was at the first computer lab in IU, and it had the floppy disk to look over at. So I think it's a strength. That's why I'm here, just to learn more about it.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm Randy Bledden, self-employed consultant focused in the printing industry. 1982, so I guess it's 43 years, something like that. if I've done my math right, and 10 years with one of the software vendors prior to that. So I go back to the mini computer Data General days. My basement, I got the vacuum column, reel-to-reel tape drive, along with, I was mentioning to Vince, 5 megabyte and 10 megabyte platters, removable platters. And I've still got one. I haven't turned it on in a while, but 8-inch floppies that would do 1.2 meg. So I've kind of come up through it. One of the things that I've enjoyed doing, which none of the clients have had in the past, is to extract that data and manipulate it somehow that it starts to give them a trend analysis and stuff like that. So I can pull out the variables you look at are hours, units of good production, units of bad production. You can calculate waste from that and so forth. I draw it out in either monthly increments or weekly increments. You put 12 months on a screen and somebody starts to see a year and stuff. But I'm anxious to see how AI could also apply to that. I'm grunting it out in SQL and Excel, and not the smoothest. There are times when there's a hiccup between those two packages. One of the things, I bet you I spent 100 hours on it, drove me absolutely nuts, was SQL, if you asked it for the week number, and Excel, if you asked it for the week number, they were different. And between the same vendor coming up with this wrong week number, so I'm trying to get a week number from Excel that will now align with the week number from, and finally I found, Googling, I found a function in SQL and a formula in Excel that would go to, is it ISO? I guess it'd be ISO. I think ISO is the right term. The ISO week number. I thought, hallelujah. 100 hours. Eat my brain time. I said, well, see if in Excel I can subtract 1 week, then they'll line up, and I think it got down to the point of 53 weeks versus 52 weeks is what I think it was stumbling on. So I did overcome that hiccup, and I'm anxious to see if there's a way to transition some of my stuff into AI.
Cool, thank you.
And I am Daniel Colson. I'm working remote for Compassion International as a software tester. So, yeah, but I'm coming from a data analytics company that was using AI more very heavily. It was like they were trying to stay ahead of that curve, and now I'm in a ministry that is much more cautious and slow moving and corporate, who's much more on the fence. So I've seen what it can do, and I've seen how powerful it can be, especially for software testers. Well, I don't know if I've seen that, but I've imagined it to enable people who are, it's common for a test team to not have a bunch of experienced developers on it, people who are good at manual testing and understand business rules and exploratory testing and all this, but they need to be writing automated tests or we're going to be kind of underwater forever. So I'm showing up as someone who does have development experience on a test team of about a dozen manual testers, and I want to see my organization come off the fence and embrace GitHub Copilot would be fantastic, and then put that tool in the hands of manual testers to enable them to contribute to the automated tests so they're not just constantly failing water.
You want to go, Matt?
Sure. I'm Matt Llewellyn, VP of Engineering at Level 12, so I work with him. Or he works with me. I'm not sure that I know him, but I've been with the outfit for almost 20 years now, and AI has been a part of it for a long time now. Before the generative AI revolution, we had machine learning and or deep learning. We had some projects that used that. Then generative AI came along, and we're not always first adopters in a new tool or technology, but we've certainly gotten our feet wet in it and working in a few different projects. It's certainly a strength if it is used well. It can be a weakness if it is not used well, and it can really undermine the efforts that you're trying to put in. Caleb will talk about some of that. We've seen opportunities to use it in a number of our clients' projects, whether that's for cleaning up data or trying to mine data out of large blocks of text, such as like a like a job description, trying to get things like salary and stuff like that out of a giant block of text. Yeah, it's been interesting to develop some expertise there, and also to be able to figure out where things just aren't really going to help you if you're trying it in AI. Like for your problem, you could probably ask a GPT now, what's the difference between
Copilot would
weeks
come up probably and tell me right away.
Yeah.
Or figure out the week.
Mm-hmm.
And it took, I'm sure it was every minute of 100 hours that I just beat my brains out. And it was very perplexing, pretty frustrating. And how I even recognized ISO and recognized that now I've got a standard to go by and stuff. It took a while, but thankful that all of a sudden it showed up. But you're right, Copilot might have instantly said, "Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
that
ISO,"
or
you know.
ChatGPT or one of the others. I have started to make a regular practice of asking ChatGPT something first. If I need to go dig into documentation on something, because chances are its model already has ingested all of that documentation. It can boil it down for me, and I can have a conversation with it and say, here's what I'm trying to do. I've run into times where it's a little bit out of date, and it will give me directions to do something that don't work anymore, and then I'll tell it, yeah, this doesn't work anymore. Oh, okay. So
I deal with old technology quite often, so one of the products, the most current version of SQL that they'll run on is 2008. So in some cases, I'm bumping up against technology walls. The product was put end of life, I don't know, 2012, and I've still got a bunch of clients running it, which is too bad. But the cost to replace is tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. So, and the one client, his IT guy uses ChatGPT, and I watched him do it, but I have not gone directly into it. One of the problems I spend some time on, not a ton of time, is syntax. So I'll be doing some SQL command, and I don't know whether or not you put the field that you're trying to parse, and it's like substring or something. Now let's see, substring's an easy one because the field and then starting position and number of characters, but syntax always haunts me. That's one of those things I want to memorize.
Yeah,
Right.
That's what does.
Yep.
You do a lot of that tedious stuff, and sometimes it'll apply. It's surprising how much of your brain space that takes up, and if you can keep it at a high level, you just keep
I'm glad I have no idea about that.
Rachel, you want to share?
I'm Rachel. I am admin and pretty much anything else that Level 12 needs me to do. So a large part of my job is supporting these guys, which I love. So it's really helpful for me, even in just thinking through, or like starting to like get my brain going. Ironically, it will spit out like blatantly wrong information. But another thing that we do the custom development side, but we also do a lot of Salesforce administration and development, and that's Salesforce's big push is their AI. Everything from the selling team to educating those of us who are in the industry, to the point where it's getting to be, if you don't have this experience or this knowledge, then it seems like you're going to be left out. But because it's so new and so many organizations just are not equipped to handle it, like their data is bad, or like they just don't have, they might have use cases for it, but they just don't have the bandwidth yet. So it's still very much a work in progress. I mean, I do want to eventually dive into it, but last one, my answer would be yes.
Mhm. Yep.
Very similar to that.
Mhm.
If you use it wisely, you use it well, and one thing I always want to be mindful of is just thoughtful use. What should and shouldn't, what it should and shouldn't be used for, and how will it help the person's hurt. So.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. For the next part, I'll speak for a lot longer than I did the first time, and then we'll close with a sort of a discussion style thing, just like we just did. As we move on to the next section, I'd like to just start by defining some terms. So what is AI, specifically generative AI, because that's what all the hype is about nowadays. Generative AI is called generative AI because it's AI that generates original content, such as text, audio, and video. So whereas in the field previously, it would have been more analytics-based, sorting things into buckets based on patterns it had seen previously, now it's generating original content never seen before based on what it's processed. Generative AI is a type of deep learning. It's called deep because it includes multiple layers of what are called neural networks, and neural networks mimic the functionality of the human brain. So that brings with it a couple of things. This deep learning neural networks, they make mistakes and surprise us sometimes. Even the developers of the technology are sometimes surprised by the results they get. They sometimes will get inconsistent results from the same input. However, this has also vastly increased AI's capabilities and laid the foundation for the generative AI revolution that we see today. Some other important terms to know. First is foundation models. So a foundation model is an unspecialized generative AI that's trained on large amounts of data. An example would be ChatGPT. It's not necessarily trained for any specific purpose or industry, but it's trained on a large amount of data, and it can be used for many different purposes. It can also, a layer of additional training can be layered over top of it to turn it into a more specialized model. Another term that you'll hear bandied about is LLM, a large language model. A large language model is a foundation model focused on text-based tasks versus speech or audio tasks. So an LLM is a foundation model that's specifically dealing with text, which is, if you're using ChatGPT or something like that, is probably what you're most familiar with. It leverages innovation in NLP, which is another term you may have heard, natural language processing. So as computers have been better able to more efficiently and effectively process human language, that's laid the foundation for things like LLMs. A couple other important terms to define that are a little bit newer. First one is RAG, which you may also have heard of, retrieval augmented generation. So whereas previously an AI model may have been trained on existing data, and then as you interact with that model, the only data that that model has is the data it's been trained on and the data that you give it in the prompt. RAG allows that model to go out and retrieve additional information to answer the prompt, solve the problem. So that may be from a public source like the internet, or it may be from a private database. If this AI model is hooked up to your company's private database, it can also have access to that and then retrieve information, even if it's not necessarily trained on that information as a model. The next term, and this is probably the hottest one right now, is AI agents, right? So what makes an AI agent an AI agent? An AI agent is an AI instance that can act autonomously, given a mission and tools to accomplish a given problem. So an AI agent is characterized by the ability to go out and do things. So when you interact with ChatGPT, generally you're asking it a question with a prompt, and then you're getting some information back. ChatGPT is typically not taking any kind of action on your behalf. But an AI agent can do all sorts of things. Instead of suggesting code for you to add to your code base, it can go in and edit that code. It can open a pull request to your repository. It can merge that pull request. It can deploy that code if you want it to. An AI agent can do anything that you equip it to do. And that's what makes it an AI agent. So an AI agent is differentiated from an AI assistant by level of autonomy. So if you're dealing with something like a chatbot that can take actions on your behalf, and you tell it, do this, and then it goes and does that, that's an AI assistant, right? It can do things for you, but it's not autonomous. An AI agent has the ability to be given a task, and then it goes. It figures out how to solve that with minimum human involvement afterward. So we've laid the foundation for what AI is. We've defined some terms. Let's talk about what this exciting new technology can and can't do. So first, AI can perform well-defined tasks within automated workflows with superhuman speed and flexibility that we just didn't have the capability of before. So here are some examples that we've seen at level 12. The first example, and I think Matt talked about it earlier, is not actually generative AI specific. It's a level or two above. But we were involved on a project that used drones to inspect machines for damage. So you can use an AI model, you can tell it this is what damage looks like. This is what a machine looks like when it needs repairs. And so then if you send out a drone to go take footage of a machine and then you run it through that model without human involvement, it can tell you whether or not a repair is needed on that given machine. Now that's not necessarily generating unique content, so that's not generative AI. So here are a couple of ways that we've used generative AI. Matt also touched on this example, which is job listing analytics. So we wanted to get analytics on over 100,000 job listings within a given geographic area. And as Matt talked about, that information is often not structured, right? It's not a database that you can query and it's going to give you the salary and then the benefits and categorize everything nicely for you. It's oftentimes just a big blob of text on Indeed or wherever you're scraping it from. Without generative AI, that would have been almost impossible, very difficult to process all of that text in a successful way programmatically. With generative AI, we had about a 90% rate of success in processing 125,000 records with relatively minimal cost associated. Another example that we've used generative AI in is on a project that was seeking to do conversational impersonation of a real person using AI. So the project would take an expert on some subject matter, take the materials that author had written, podcast interviews that they'd been on, talks that they'd given, whatever resources or materials were there. And then after processing all of that, it would be able to have a real-time conversation with someone mimicking the opinion and the tone and the voice of the expert on the subject matter. Again, something that would have been very difficult, if not impossible, to do before generative AI came on the scene and allowed us to process data in the ways that we can now. So I'd also like to talk about just a couple quick examples of how AI could be applied in ways that we haven't yet. So we work on software as a service and alerting application that sends out mass alerts to schools, municipalities, and things like that. Some are emergency, some aren't. But character count is very important in these alerts because if you send out a long alert, people are less likely to read it. It's potentially more expensive to send, and it potentially takes longer to send, which especially matters in an emergency. So what we can do is build an AI into the interface where someone's typing in the message that they want to send to suggest a more concise way to say what they want to say using less characters. So that would be a way that we could apply AI. For this same application, we have a wide range of users who are using this application, right? So it might be an older church secretary who's trying to send alerts to the church and doesn't have much technical background at all versus somebody who's way up in a tech company that wants to send alerts to their employees, right? So we have to make our technology accessible to all kinds of different users. In this case, we could create support articles on what to do, how to accomplish different things, how to solve common problems. We can overlay a chatbot over those articles who's familiar with that data. and then allow our users to access that chatbot. So if they have a question about how to do something in the application, they type in the question, the chatbot's able to answer them based on the support articles that we've written, and then that limits human involvement and gets somebody an instant response to the question that they need to ask without waiting on somebody. So we've talked about how AI can enhance automations, perform well-defined tasks within a workflow. But AI can also augment people. So it doesn't just help business processes be more efficient. It helps people be more efficient. AI enhances humans by expanding their knowledge base and processing power. So here are some examples of how I've used AI in my position at level 12. So first, I think through business strategy and strategic level decisions. When I'm thinking about solving a problem and thinking about potential solutions, I can then go to a ChatGPT or similar, type in the problem that I'm solving, some solutions that I think might work, ask ChatGPT to point out biases in my thinking or solutions that I haven't thought of. Even tell me why it thinks one solution is better than another. And then go find the sources that it links out to and do some research. So another task that I'm often involved in my role is turning vague or big client requirements into bite-sized development tasks. That's something that an LLM can do as well. You're giving it a text description of what you'd like to do, and then you're asking it to break it down, ask you questions if it needs to, break it down into smaller tasks. So those are both higher level thinking things that you can use AI for. You can also use AI to do things for you. So as a coder, coding is text, right? So AI is good and getting better and better at writing code. So if I can spend more time designing and architecting a solution and less time typing out the code and figuring out syntax problems that I need to actually implement the design solution, the better developer I am, the faster I am, the better solutions I'm able to deliver to our clients and faster. There are a lot of things AI can do. I haven't touched the surface of all the things that they can do, but of course it can't do everything. So let's talk about some of the things that AI can't do. So first, AI cannot be truly human, obviously. The A in AI will always be there. AI will always be artificial. It lacks true understanding of what it says. It'll state a lie very convincingly, wrapped in all kinds of truths. And it's not trying to mislead you. It's not a person, right? It's behind the scenes, it's a very advanced statistical machine that's giving output. And so if it makes a mistake, it may not be able to understand why it made a mistake. And once it goes off track, you may not be able to get it on track very quickly. And I'm sure some of us have experienced that. Secondly, it lacks true creativity. Don't get me wrong. AI is great at extrapolation, and it can generate truly original content. But it's all based on what it's been trained on. And it's not like a human in the text, audio, and video that it generates. So we have to keep that in mind. Keep in mind that it's limited by what it's been trained on, and that it's not being truly creative. It's just extrapolating from what it's already seen. Lastly, AI lacks emotion and conscience. It just does what it's trained to do. You can train it to act empathetic. You can train it to follow a certain code of ethics, but if there's any kind of flaw in your training, it's just going to do what it's been trained to do. You can train it to be mean to people. You can train it to follow a bad code of ethics, and it'll just do that. Remember, at the end of the day, it's a machine that does what it's trained to do. Secondly, AI is not magical. It can't solve every problem, and it can't even solve all the problems that it does solve perfectly or well even. There are two things that AI is dependent on, and they're key things to keep in mind. The first is the training of the model, and the second is the effectiveness of the prompt that it's been given. So if an AI is trained on out-of-date data, as Matt alluded to earlier, you're going to get an out-of-date response. If the last data it was trained on was 5 years ago, it's going to tell you how to do something 5 years ago. It's not going to tell you how to do it today. If it's been trained in English, right? It's not going to be able to give you output in Japanese. If you need domain-specific knowledge or company-specific knowledge that it's not been trained on, it just does not have that information. So we can't assume that it knows everything. There's also potentially bias or misinformation in the data that a model has been trained on. So as we're interacting with a model, we need to realize that it can't go beyond its data in terms of what it's been trained on. Secondly is the effectiveness of the prompt. An AI model doesn't understand implicit context. It doesn't know your business like you do. It may not be able to pick up on subtleties in your prompt. Oftentimes, it will not ask questions, challenge assumptions, or consider other points of view. If you give it a task to accomplish, even if you're asking it to accomplish it in the total wrong way, it'll help you do that. So we need to be careful about the prompts that we're giving AI. We need to attach the right information and explain the right information without assuming that the AI knows what we're talking about. This process is called prompt engineering. Even if we're using AI properly, however, with a mind to what it can and can't do, there are various risks associated with AI. And I'm going to begin speeding up here because we're close to out of time. But privacy, reliability, misinformation, and over-reliance are all big risks associated with AI. I'll just point out one of them. AI models sometimes train themselves on the data that you give them. So if you give private information to an AI that's publicly accessible, and then it brings that into its training, you've now made private data public. So you need to recognize how the model that you're using is going to use the data that you have. Read the contracts, ask the question, don't assume the answer. Lastly, as we look to how we can begin adopting AI, first, start small. If you don't have an account on ChatGPT, get an account and start using it. If you're thinking, maybe I should start using AI in this way, start experimenting. Get your feet wet, start moving. Don't stay on that fence. Do internal and external research. Look at yourself. Look at your business's processes. Figure out where are the gaps, where are the bottlenecks, how could AI help, and then do research, not on LinkedIn, right, from reputable sources, on how AI could solve this problem. Create a formal plan, implement the plan, and do not forget to iterate, right? It's not a process that starts and then stops after you've done a few steps. You've got to start over and keep working on it. So my takeaways are be excited about AI, not anxious, and get your info from reputable sources. We can adopt AI poorly without understanding its uses, and that'll cause us to waste time and money and potentially introduce huge risks like privacy or security risks. However, if we adopt AI well, we can spend less time doing the things anyone can do, let AI do those for us, and spend more time doing the things that only we can do that make us unique. And that will allow us and our teams to be happier and more productive. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're at 1 o'clock here. So if you need to leave, feel free. And for this final discussion, it'll be a little bit more open-ended. If you have any questions for Matt and I, who are a little bit more involved in AI and how it might specifically apply to your use case, it's an open forum. Feel free to ask us.
No one else has a question, I'll hog it.
Yeah.
So I'm doing all these analytics. I was telling you I got 12 weeks. There might be 5 or 6 machines, multiple operators on each machine. My biggest problem right now is the manager has too much to look at. They're looking at this and their eyes glaze over and stuff like that. Is AI an application that would kind of replace the, what's the format in Excel? We can change the color of the fields based upon whether or not they meet a certain standard. Could AI replace that? Could AI look through all that data and say, these are the ones that seem to be outside of norm, whatever norm is defined?
Yeah, you certainly could.
Yeah.
So in that case, you would be essentially generating like a table for the AI to look at, like your Excel sheet, and you would want to put in prompts this is what the data means, because the AI is not going to know what it means unless you tell it. It's also not going to know what your thresholds are that you're trying to look for that data.
Max, yeah.
Yeah. And then in your prompt, you can tell it, here's my data, here's my thresholds, here's what it means. Now tell me who is out of spec.
Yeah, exactly. So the
And
manager
if you
says,
give it that,
here's the 3 guys that you need to go pound on.
that's right. So you could run that prompt in the background, give the output to the manager, and he's not going to have to look at a table full of values and let his eyes glaze over. He can just say, here's my, Bob, Fred, and George. They need to step it up in their production.
That's part of my frustration is I get all this stuff and I've got all these graphs and stuff like that. I call them a month later or something. Oh, I haven't had time to look at that. And they're not looking at it because they're just overwhelmed. They for the life of them, they can't figure out what it means.
So I was telling you about the guy that developed your friend about looking at Gmail.
Yeah.
He doesn't even look at Gmail. He has it where it will give him what he needs to know, and he never has to open up Gmail.
So he doesn't open the envelope, but he sees the
It
contents of the
automatically
envelope.
figures out because he said this is what I need to know.
Mhm.
If not,
But it's
put
not
it here,
parsing-
send it to here.
It's
And I
not
went,
parsing, it's not parsing the user, but it's actually opening.
it's looking at Gmail.
It's looking
and-
inside the
Yep.
envelope and saying, here's the sentence that makes the most sense that
Yeah.
you need to know about.
And so for his type of business, absolutely. Could you imagine how much time to save? Now, the question I have is, do you help companies or individuals teach them the proper way to do prompts? Because that's the key, is what you have to try to tell them the right thing to get the most effectiveness, right? Am I-
You do. So the prompting, prompt engineering was a really big catchphrase when ChatGPT took off. And I mean like GPT 3, 3.5, somewhere in there, where people really started to use it a lot more. As the models have gotten more advanced, we have actually, or I have actually seen that the quality of the prompt is becoming a little bit less important. You do not need to be quite as exact.
Yeah.
However, if you're looking for very specific results, like you would be, you do need to put in those parameters of here's what the data
Yeah,
means.
what we call norm, sure.
And it's also helpful to provide examples within the prompt to say, here's an example of data that's not within spec, or here's an example of the address format that I'm trying to produce. Those sorts of things can be very helpful.
We also had a situation at my old job where we were using it more heavily, where they got stuck and they had some kind of breakthrough where they started making our AI agent talk to itself. So it was generating its own prompt. Instead of giving it a prompt, it would say, write a prompt for yourself. And he likened this to the agent sitting there and thinking, just taking some space to think, have a conversation with itself.
Yep.
And that somehow got us unstuck.
There are all kinds of tips to prompt engineering, like the ones Matt said. One is have the AI come up with the prompt, tell it the task. Other ones that people use is to assign a persona. So so if you're on ChatGPT, say, you are an expert in X, right? Like you ask great questions and make sure you fully understand my business before you answer me. And then you say, so then another one is ask it to ask you questions if it's not sure, because as Matt alluded to, I think it's getting better at this, but oftentimes it'll just go for it, even if it only has half the information that it needs to do what you just told it to do. So if you couch maybe some of your more complex prompts in, please ask me questions that you need to know the answers to solve this problem, that can often be really helpful. Another one is, I think it's called prompt chaining. So instead of trying to get everything you want by sending in one big prompt, go piece by piece, right? So break down the task at hand into a smaller one. So maybe if you don't know the thresholds that you want or something like that. Ask it to help you figure out what those thresholds should be.
To go back into history, I got 20 years worth of data, figure out what the range is, and then say anything outside of 50% of this range needs to be prompted.
Right.
And that would be, I guess, a prompt.
Mhm.
We're talking
Yeah.
about prompts, so that's interesting.
So you talked about like a job description.
Mhm.
So I was just helping a company try to find labor market data.
Mhm.
So I'm just thinking, you said about job descriptions. So how, if ChatGPT looked at the job description
Mhm.
and all, could that be data enough to then search to find out what people are being paid through different parts of the country? And that, is that something, and how do you load up, like, see, this is how dumb I am. I mean, how do you load the job description? Do you just insert it? I don't even know.
Yeah, so in our particular case, we simply took the job description and put it in as part of the prompt. And then the rest of the prompt was telling it, what do I want to mine out
Okay.
of this particular job description. We would look for salary, benefits. We would try to associate it with a ONET occupation.
That's, yeah.
Just so that
that's what I was
from the
throwing-
job title, you can't always tell very specifically what industry this is or what really particular occupation this is. It's a lot more natural language text that you need to, but if you give it the whole description, if you give it an ONET code,
Yeah.
and say these are all welders, these are all accountants,
Mhm.
these are all,
Okay.
and then it becomes much more structured to go and search and do analytics on that data later on. To the question of, can I get it to tell me what the salary range is, say, across the country? That's a little bit more difficult. You can do that in the chat interface in like ChatGPT, and it will go search for you and do some web research and analysis.
We use
try to come up with
Whitecast
something.
as one, and then the state of Indiana has their own.
Mhm.
So I was just
So
wondering.
it probably knows some of those sources.
Uh-huh.
If you're going from the back end and doing it programmatically, like from your application and going through OpenAI's platform API, that doesn't exist. You can't tell it, go search for this and find it. It won't go look at the web for
Okay.
it. It won't fetch web pages and things like that. So
Okay.
there's a little bit limited in that way, but you still have the whole model at your disposal.
Wow. And ChatGPT is free, right? And that
Yes,
on like,
it's free to chat
and
with.
not an Outlook or Microsoft? I mean, is that what pops up? Because you'll see if you, like if I search something,
Mhm.
you'll see that it's pulling there.
Yeah,
So
I use the Microsoft browser, and Copilot comes up automatically anymore. So Copilot is Microsoft's ChatGPT, if
That's
I'm,
right.
if I'm
Mhm.
understanding it right.
Yeah.
All the search engines are starting to boil down results through the AI engines. Like Google uses Gemini, and you get results from
I
that.
haven't used
Okay.
the Copilot very often. Typically, I'll find a link faster than Copilot writes out the story, and I'll click on the link prior to reading. Every once in a while, I'll wait for Copilot and take a look at it.
Wow, very interesting.
Yeah, and for further questions, ask AI. See what it says, and then if you don't get a good answer, ask us. We're here for you. Well, appreciate you. We're officially over, but feel free to hang around and chat.